Hello and welcome to Club Talk Hurling of a Monday here, brought to you by orgaretro.com. If you want to get these sort of cool jerseys, go to orgaretro.com and get 15% off using the promo code OurGame. Michael Verney, another interesting weekend of hurling. We're going to start off in Wexford, but any particular highlights, something that stands out to you?
No, I was in Semple Stadium yesterday for Lough and Kilkenny, where everything was on the line. A big game, and Kilkenny just didn't deliver again. But it's just amazing when you start seeing teams maybe crippled by a bit of fear or crippled with nerves, and it just while championships have been played much earlier this year, it's also the prospect of being out of a championship much earlier. So Kilkenny are now out of the Tipp championship, as loads of other teams are out of other championships, and you're probably not sitting on the sidelines watching on as long as maybe other years where there's 2 and 3 week gaps to semi-finals and finals. But it's still going to be very, very difficult to be watching on as things are going on and only really starting to heat up in some counties.
Yeah, and there's so much to cover here. The Wexford semi-finals, the Waterford quarter-finals, where for the second week in a row Austin Gleeson was sent off. We'll touch on Kerry, we'll touch on Kilkenny and the Tipperary championships, and we'll do a bit of roundup of some other fixtures as well. If there's any comments that or anything we've missed, please get the comments into us at Shane Saint and at ML Verney. Right, we'll start off in the Wexford Championship. The 2 semi-finals. Shelmaliers beat Barntown 320 to 16 points. Naveana beat Allard de Bala 120 to 119. So that was a late winner there. Naveana and Shelmaliers is going to be a repeat of their. They were in the same group earlier in the season, which is probably only just a couple of weeks ago. And it's next Sunday that this final is going to be on TG Cahir. It's been run at breakneck speed. But Shelmaliers, to beat Barntown like that, this was a Barntown team that came in probably as favourites after knocking out St Martin's. And Barntown went 7 points to 1 ahead early on. So Shelmaliers won the rest of the game 3-19 to 9 points. That's incredible.
Yeah, I think we kind of half teed it up last week. It can, when you knock out the reigning champions and the hot favourites, it can go one of two ways. Either it gives you this great momentum boost and you really, really drive it on, or subconsciously maybe you start thinking maybe that you're better than you are, or you're after knocking out the big dog in the championship. You're the big dog now, and maybe the pressure comes on, and that's really what it looked like with Barntown. Just didn't really deliver after that first quarter. And again, we talked about the water breaks. Simon Donoghue has a quote there. He just said the water break came at a good time for us. This is the Shelmaliers and Wexford defender. We had a dressing down, a few home truths were told, and even Vinnie Parker said after, he said, you know, like if it had continued on like for 5 more minutes as it had before the water break, they were in trouble. But instead, after the water break, they totally turned it around. I think they were 2-8 to 8 up at the break, and they just I think we had a couple. I think Dublin's Fair City actually left a comment last week. Said he said he wasn't impressed with us calling them Shels, because the only Shels around are Shelburne Football Club, and he also said that he wasn't impressed with what he saw from Shels against Fate Harriers last week. So Dublin's Fair City a bit of egg in his face this morning, and I won't mind, he slags me off enough, whoever he is. But I thought they were brilliant. The day I saw them against Fate Harriers. Worked the ball out really, really well, and they're proper football inside. A lot of off the shoulder running as well. And as we said last week, they've had time just for hurling only. There's no pressure of football. There's nothing looming in the background, and they seem to be thriving on it. And we mentioned about the footballers there. Yeah, you have 3 county footballers in particular, like Brian Malone and Glenn Malone, absolutely flying it for them. And they're going to be very, very hard beaten. Going to be a really interesting final. But geez, they really ripped Barntown apart after that first quarter.
Yeah, Conor Hearn has been a revelation since moving to midfield. A young lad, Martin Byrne, he's been coaching them, and he was with Carlo in the last few years as well, and they've obviously made strides. Really, really impressive win for Naveana, who won the title just a couple of years ago. It sounds like it was very, very nervy against Allard de Bala. And get in any comments and let us know if you were at that game, because it's hard to see every game. Not everything is streamed either. But Conor MacDonald and Cathal Dunbar, they got 3 points apiece from play, and MacDonald got the late winner. Like, that makes some difference when you have the county star that you know he has a fairly hot hand, and if you get the ball to him enough, especially in pressure situations, it's like in basketball. Get the ball to Michael Jordan at the very end and he's going to knock it into the hoop. So it's always good to have that county star up front.
100%. I was chatting to Billy Byrne last week down in Wexford Park, obviously Gorey and Wexford legend, and he was just saying, like, there's obviously a lot of pressure on the two lads. on Dunbar and McDonald to deliver. But he said there's an awful lot of other younger players kind of stepping up, and then there's just a bit more kind of attention needed for some of these younger players. They take a bit of attention off McDonald and Dunbar, and then when those boys are really needed, they seem to be stepping up. McDonald really stepped up in the last quarter of the quarter final against Ferns, and he stepped up again yesterday. It's amazing when, like, Naomh won their first county title 2 years ago, and they'd been around there for a couple of years at senior, getting to the quarterfinals, semi-finals. But now that have gotten over the line, and they just seem to be able to get over the line in these big games now. Like, if this had been 2 or 3 years ago, you'd imagine it would have been Oulart, the ones that were finishing strong in a really, really tight game like this. But Naomh, after getting over the line again, it's going to be a really, really interesting final. As you say, next week. It's so quickly. I believe Naomh had a big injury in the quarterfinal as well, and lost one of their defenders to a big injury. But it's going to be a really, really interesting final. I'd still be favouring Shelmaliers. I just like their team play. I think they're a fairly well-oiled machine. Just something Simon Donoghue said as well. He just said, we've been told we don't have forwards to score goals, or we don't score enough, but we scored 22 points the last day against a blanket defence against Fate Harriers. We scored 320 today. So while they mightn't look like they have any superstars, I remember seeing Ross Banville for the Wexford under-20s last year, very impressive. Sean Keane Carroll, who wears 6 and is invariably playing in the half-forward line, he's a very, very good player as well. Then you have like Simon Donoghue, Glenn Malone, Brian Malone, Jody Donoghue, who often plays as an extra defender almost. He put over 2 points against Fate Harriers. I think he put over a point yesterday as well. It's going to be a really, really interesting game. I'd probably expect Brian Malone could probably drop back on McDonald or Dunbar and try and tie up him like he tied up Leach in against the Harriers. But going to be a really, really interesting final. Shelmaliers haven't won it since 2014, and will probably be. We talked about Mount Leinster in Carlow. Possibly going for a double this year. This has been their best chance of getting a double. Shelmaliers, this would be their best chance ever, probably winning the double. Won the football 2 years ago, and are probably marginal favourites for the hurling final, I'd say, next Sunday.
And another guy worth mentioning for Naomh is Charlie McGuckin, who of course is was Wexford under-20. I think he was captain last year. I remember interviewing him at a press event. Alright, so he's another bit of quality in that team. We did a power rankings last week, and I was being fairly scoffed at, I felt at the time when I picked it, because I went Shels 1, Naomh 2, Glenbarntown 3, Oulart 4, and do you know what? That's not
No. You actually put Barrentown 4. So I actually don't like giving you any credit that you don't deserve, but you actually put Barrentown 4, in fairness to you.
Actually, and thank you for correcting me, because that makes me look even more correct, because they lost by 13 points, whereas Oulart only lost by 1. So thanks for clarifying there. But yeah, that wasn't too far off it. We'll actually do a power rankings. We'll try and do one every week for one county or other. We're going to do one for Waterford at the end, but just to chat about the fixtures at the weekend and the quarter-final results. Passage beat Rowan by 114 to 13 points. Ballygunner, I suppose, surprise, they saw 4 Mile Water 218 to 12 points. Lismore beat Abbeyside 222 to 311, and Mount Sion, they had a surprise win against De La Salle 318 to 217. But just before we come to that game, that's obviously the meatiest of the lot, a little word on Passage beating Rowan.
Oh, it's a great win for them. Like, they have relatively small numbers, and Michael Walsh, who was coach with Westmeath under Michael Ryan for years, and obviously the former Kilkenny goalie, he's over them. And just some quotes from him, and it kind of probably an insight into dealing with a smaller area and what you have to do kind of to get the most out of them. He just said, when we started out before lockdown, we didn't know what the story was this year. A lot of lads were away and we didn't know who we really had. A lot of young lads came on board. We worked really hard and a spirit was created. Then some of the lads returned from their travels and they got involved. Wins like this create a great spirit in a team and in a parish. To get a semi-final for us this year is massive. To get to a semi-final, I'm not sure at the start of the year if anyone saw this coming. And he just talked about Owen Connors, brother of Noel, who was man of the match in the 2013 final when they're the last team to beat Ballygunner. That was in the 2013 final. He drove over a couple of great scores, and including a late score from his own 65. And Michael Walsh just said he was one of the lads that was away with work. We didn't know what to do. I just said to him, if you're ready to come back to us, we'd be delighted to have you. When the lockdown was over, he probably realised that it's great to have a little something in our lives. He's a huge leader, and no more than Noel Connors as well, his brother, a massive leader as well. But a big result for them. And the way that we'll go through the draw, I'm sure, for the semi-final in a few minutes, the way it has transpired, like a great chance to get to a county final for passage.
Yeah, absolutely. Facing a Mount Sion team that they beat a couple of years ago in a semi-final, albeit things have kind of changed in the meantime. Just to look at the other results, Ballygunner 36 games without defeat in Waterford at this stage. They saw 4 Mile Water, no surprise there, chasing 7 in a row, I think it is at this stage.
7 in a row, yeah.
Yeah, Lismore, so Morris Shannon scored 111, obviously plenty of frees in there, and you'd have people messaging saying, stop just reading out his scorelines, clarify the fact that maybe 1-3 was from play or whatever it might be. But also Oisin O'Gorman, so they're not a one trick pony. Oisin O'Gorman, he scored 1-5 from play. Dan Shanahan also came on, so that's a big win for Lismore, who faced...
Yeah, I think Morris got 1-4 from play over the weekend. And in fairness, we've kind of talked in previous shows, like, he probably will be thinking that what more can he do to get back in the Waterford panel than do what he is doing with his club. Like, Lismore would not have been touted as getting to a semi-final in Waterford. No way. When the championship started, they would not.
Yeah, you'd have to credit him for having this sort of form. I mean, this is what he does with the club anyway. But it'd be interesting to see if Liam Cahill's head is turned by this, because it's very easy to just decide, right, I've made my decision, I've dropped a guy from the panel, he's a big name, and just plough on regardless. But it'll be interesting to see what Liam Cahill makes of this. Does he kind of say, well, this guy has shown me something, and that's what I want as Waterford manager. I want a player who can shake things up. And if Morris has done enough, why wouldn't you? I mean, I think you as a manager, if you were a manager, you wouldn't ignore it. At the very least, you'd be thinking, maybe he is worth bringing back in to see.
If a lad is in form, Shane, you know yourself, if a lad is in form, you can't ignore that. And he's clearly in form. He's putting up big scores. Not only putting up big scores, I think the last day he didn't actually put up that big of a score himself, but he set up a load of scores as well. Like, he's able to do kind of both. Even when he's well man marked, he can make sure that the likes of Oisin O'Gorman flourish. But it'd be very, very interesting to see. As I said, it's always nice when you go out at county level or go out any level that you go out in your own terms. So it'd be nice if you got the opportunity as well. This is a completely different year as well. It's on county championships. County campaign is only going to go on for 2 months or so if it does go on. So I would see no reason why he wouldn't be called in. As well, as we said, if it's going to be in the winter time, it's not so much about speed, not as much about speed, which is probably the one criticism he gets. So it would suit him even better to be playing in November and December. So my head would definitely be turned if I was Liam Cahill.
So the big city clash then: Mount Sion 318, De La Salle 217. Austin Gleeson is going to grab the headlines no matter what happens, it seems. Apparently very, very good in this game. Now, I was talking to my cousin who's based down there and is in the De La Salle camp, and he was saying he was just gliding across the turf. Scored 4 points from play, I think, in the second half. Involved in an awful lot of what was good about Mount Sion. Set up Alan Curban with one of his trademark runs. I mean, we've all seen the sort of a body transformation he's had recently, and he looks in unbelievable shape. But this is a second week in a row that he's got himself a red card. Now, the one from the previous week was rescinded. I felt it was a red card. I thought he buried his man. He was looking to catch him on the shoulder. I don't feel he caught him on the shoulder. Even so, he was allowed to play in this game, and he got 2 yellow cards. One was for a swinging arm on Eddie Meany, and the second was for a frontal charge on Kevin Moran. Now, I've seen them, and I have to say, I think on balance he deserved to go. I think it was 2 yellow cards. I'm not saying he went out to do anyone, obviously, but I do think that both of those tackles were a little bit reckless and he had to go. Now, there's a tweet from Peter Cleary saying, disgusting the way Austin Gleeson has been treated by officials. Cards for things other players are getting away with. Wouldn't blame the guy if he walked away. You've seen the incidents as well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, two definite yellows. The one on Kevin Moran is a possible red, I would say, because he's actually down trying to pick up the ball, and it's more of a shoulder to the side of the head, I would say. I don't think it's a case of referees targeting him or anything like that. But I think if you put yourself into situations like that, no more than the helmet pull in the All Ireland semi-final in 2017. If you remember, he kind of got away with a helmet pull and ended up getting the All Ireland final. Yeah, if you put yourself in those positions, you're going to end up in the headlines. So to be honest with you, that was a definite red card for me. I would have had no qualms if the second one nearly was maybe not a straight red, but if there was something between a yellow and a red, like a 1.5 cards, it probably would have been. So I don't see any problem there. the thing is, it's funny. I find it. There's been an awful lot of red cards rescinded already in the club championships. They had Joe Canning's rescinded, Austin Gleeson's was rescinded. I think there was a one down in Cork rescinded as well. A couple
Killian
more.
O'Connor and Mayo, I remember.
Yeah, it's a strange one. I don't think if any of those are at county level that they'd be rescinded. But county boards are under so much pressure, and all the CCCs in the various counties. Maybe not getting to give a lot of these things as much time as they would normally do, but there's just been a good few rescinded, which is surprising, I think.
Yeah, there was plenty of comments or responses to Peter Cleary's tweet, and if I'll just read out a couple of them. Sham Carr goes, he shouldn't have been playing in the first place, disgracefully got after that challenge the last day. Sean Hennessy, that's what happens when he should have been sent off in the semi-final v Cork. Karma, didn't see it today, but last red for a high challenge was red deserved, says a guy at Blue Cat 77. Ian Power, absolutely disgraceful, targeted by refs. David O'Neill shouldn't have been playing today. And Sean Dower, nobody but the ref will honestly have any idea about the second yellow. I spoke with some De La Salle people after the game, and even they are scratching their heads. Poor decision by ref, it should be explained. Haven't seen the clip, the referee has nothing to explain. I think he did have to go. Now, just some other things in the game. A lot of people would have expected De La Salle to win this because they'd been to the final last year. It feels like they're probably closer to knocking Ballygunner off their perch than Mount Sion, who haven't always looked like making a breakthrough in the last couple of years. But they do have plenty of quality, like Stephen Roach, he's been on the panel before, obviously Austin Gleeson, Martin Blondie O'Neill, I think he put up a big score in this game, and he's just back from Canada this year, and he was a minor captain before for Waterford. Ian O'Regan, he's still in the goals, and they were, apparently they've done well at minor, and they set themselves up very well. So all of a sudden, Mount Sion, they feel like not quite dark horses, but sort of greyish horses.
Yeah, I saw tweets from Ken McGrath and even Pádraig Fanning last night, kind of saying that nobody really outside of Mount Sion probably saw this coming, and I have to admit, I definitely didn't see it coming anyway, because I thought De La Salle were clear number 2 in Waterford. But when you have Austin and a few other lads on form, they're capable of pulling out a result like this. The only worry that I'd have, obviously they're not playing them in the semi-final, but Ballygunner would be able to tie down and Austin Gleeson more, be able to put more attention on him. And if you're able to tie down him, maybe not Noel Connors, but someone will probably track Austin Gleeson from passage in the semi-final, try and negate his influence. And if they can, they're going to take away a fair bit of firepower for them. But the likes of, say, Blondie O'Neill, who was only back from Canada this year, having those lads back, you just need everybody at your disposal for these big club games. But it'd still be big outsiders to win the thing, but they have a great chance of getting to a final now.
Absolutely. And just for anyone who's curious, he was wearing number 6, Gleeson, but he started centre forward and then he moved out on the wing on Shane McNulty. So it'll be very interesting to see how they go against Passage. I'd now make them favourites. He got a red card, but he's going to be available because it was 2 yellows. And I think most people would expect Ballygunner to beat Lismore, but of course we'll preview that one later in the week. Just moving on to the Kerry Championship, so a couple of the results there. Kilmoyley, they beat Brendans, and I saw in a report that John Myler's involved with Kilmoyley. Of course, he's been involved in Kerry hurling plenty of times in the past, and only got knocked out as St Martin's manager in Wexford recently. So I was surprised to see his name involved there, because I just wonder how would he get the time to go from Cork to 2 different sides of the country. But there you go. Anyone who's down there, please comment and let us know. Ballyduff, they beat Ballyhigh 120 to 15 points, and then a shock result as Shane Conway's Lickshaw, they got knocked out by Abbey Dorney 118 to 19 points. So that was a big surprise there. And of course you're wearing the Kerry jersey there from orgaretro.com as we talk about the Kerry Championship. You actually wanted to make a point about the lack of dressing rooms, didn't you?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I chatted with a couple of boys about this. Championship games obviously have a completely different feel to them now. So you're not arriving to the dressing room an hour before matches and getting strapped and sitting nervously in a dressing room like that. It's just, I think it's actually an awful lot purer now. In a way, you're just arriving to the match maybe 40 minutes before it starts. You're not sitting in a dressing room kind of making awkward conversation 15 or 20 minutes before a match, or listening to a manager giving it large or whatever before a match and going through and explaining everything. It's an awful lot more pure. I think there's a lot less pressure on players. I think there's a lot less nervous energy flying around the place from players, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing in some respects not to have the dressing room available. And I'd hope that some managers would take it on board, in the sense that they would maybe realise sometimes that less is more. Like on the day of a match, you don't need to be bombarding lads with things. You don't need to be there, an hour beforehand. You can do a lot of your band work yourself. You can get your own little warm-ups done and things like that, and do it in your own time and maybe in your own comfort. So I just think it might be a blessing in disguise for some club players.
I actually think you make a really good point there, because I'm thinking of big championship games, Parnell Park, tight dressing rooms in the Dublin Club Championship. It actually is a bit like a pressure cooker. And I'm even thinking Portlaoise for some of these Leinster club games we might play it in. Yeah, it really does feel like almost the dressing room's on top of you, everyone's on top of each other, foam rolling almost on top of each other. And it does feel like there's no room to breathe in there almost. And maybe that does kind of get into some players' heads even. Maybe some people, they absolutely embrace it. But over the years, a lot of the time playing league games, we'll say, down in Shankill, because Coolidge can't really use the home ground in Dalkey, it's too small. We play a lot of league games in Shankill where there are no dressing rooms. So I've been very used to, over recent years, not having a dressing room anyway, and I kind of like it. I mean, if it's raining, obviously it's a bit of a disaster, so in that situation you don't want it. But I actually don't mind it. But the flip side is, recently, it's not like we're told to get there any later. So you're saying there's no need to be there an hour beforehand. But I don't think managers are changing what time to show up beforehand, because they want to make sure lads have time for rubs, all that kind of stuff. But in a general overall sense, I actually do like being outside beforehand. And people, let us know if you feel the same.
Just think it's a bit more relaxed or something like that. There's a bit more of a kind of, can maybe have a challenge game feel to it. And we all know lads that play unreal in challenge games and then maybe are just a bit kind of heft up or something for a championship game and maybe don't deliver. But all that nervous tension in the dressing room before a championship game is kind of eliminated now. Now, don't get me wrong, we're talking about, the day of a championship game here. Having dressing rooms for just even building, team spirit and camaraderie before and after training and that kind of crack, I think that's one thing that is definitely missing. But for championship games, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing not having dressing rooms at the moment. I just think it just feels a bit more, I think players feel a bit more kind of free and maybe removed of the shackles.
Yeah, so it is a bit of a trade-off, and again, you've made a good point there. Number one, it feels like there's less pressure. But the biggest, probably the place where most of the crack happens is the dressing room, both beforehand for a few minutes, but especially afterwards, because all the training is done, all the seriousness is over, and you can actually just have the crack in the showers, whatever it might be. I mean, everyone knows what I'm talking about, people just slating each other and having the crack. You definitely would miss that, because when you're togging out on the side of the pitch, lads are just going home, they're not dilly-dallying around, and that's where the spirit comes from, just having the crack in the dressing room afterwards.
100%. That is it basically. Yeah. It's just the comments that are passed. Be it something you did on a Saturday night, be it some girl you were with, or someone you're trying, or something like that, or anything like that. That's all the stuff. That's all the stuff that's thrown out in the dressing room beforehand. Nothing is off the table in a dressing room before or after training. No. Anything can be said. And you kind of you could get away with cutting a lad in a dressing room maybe with something that you maybe wouldn't cut him with.
It was dressing room banter.
Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of it's kind of a funny kind of a trade-off. But I don't think not having dressing rooms is necessarily a bad thing for championship games from a player's point of view.
Yeah, because I even remember running into my cousin last year, Matty Stapleton, he's still playing with Ballyhale, and I was asking him, having just had a kid, is he finding it tough to stay going hurling? And he was like, no, sure, it's great crack and all that, because it's great being down the dressing room, because someone's always after acting the ape at the weekend, so you just have a bit of crack about it. And I think that would resonate with people across the country. We'll jump on to the Kilkenny Championship, because there was loads of games at the weekend. Now, James Stephens and O'Loughlin's, they were already through from their group, but it was always going to be a big clash because it's two city teams. Ended up as a draw, 2-16 apiece. Now, doesn't really matter the result per se, but James Stephens, they turned it around late on to draw this one, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they were 4 down midway through the second half. It's funny the way the result worked out. It kind of suits the two of them. They both get through. So James Stephens come through in second. O'Loughlin's go through to the league final. James Stephens go through to the Shield final. And James Stephens and O'Loughlin both remain unbeaten throughout the group stages as well. I believe the Village left a few chances behind them and could have actually won it, even coming from behind. I think Owen Larkin was under a bit of pressure with Paddy Butler from O'Loughlin's. I think he got 4 points and he was taken off early. He's only just returned back from injury. O'Loughlin's, who maybe outside of Mark Bergen, you wouldn't think maybe to have any really standout forwards that would really light it up. They seem to be having different lads jumping up every day, and Owen Wall hit 1-4 from play. I think he's just back from still playing soccer. They were actually missing Robbie Buckley the other day. Interesting one about Owen Wall, actually. He went to St. Pat's Primary School, and under Brian Cody, but went to play for O'Loughlin Gales, which is seen as a very taboo kind of a thing to do. Usually if you go to St. Pat's, by all accounts, you're a village man. So that was interesting there. Mikey Drennan, I should say, who we all know, formerly with Aston Villa and played a good bit of League of Ireland. He's been playing fairly well. I think for the village, he got 1-1 off Hugh Lawler the other day. I think Niall Brazel and Luke Scanlon were fairly impressive from what I've heard as well. And Tipp exiled Dinny Stapleton, who's now living in Kilkenny City. He had 2 points from play for cornerback from the village. I think Danny Lucknan, who he was on, went out as a third midfielder, and Dinny got 2 long range points. Honours even, I'd be surprised if they don't clash again at some stage, maybe in a semi-final or even possibly a final.
Bennett's Bridge then against Tullaroan, so this is 222 to 118 for the Bridge. And for Tullaroan, we talked about it already, this is 3 weeks in a row up against heavy hitters. So they had Ballyhale beaten, and then a late goal from Owen Reid turned that around. Then they were beaten last week, and then they lose again here. It's an awful lot to ask of a team coming up from intermediate, but Liam Blanchfield with 1-3 from play here, that was fairly significant.
Yeah, no, Liam Blanchard has been flying there. I think he was fouled for 2 penalties the last day against Danesford. Like, he's a real powerhouse to have to look after at club level. Like, he's about 6'3" or 6'4", really, really powerful. Just only knows one thing when he gets the ball. I think he got 1-3 from play. Kieran Brennan, who was in St. Kieran's this year, he had 1-5 from play, and I think the two of them ran a 2-man full forward line together. So they're kind of maybe started a bit slow and are starting to get motoring now. I think Massey Keoghan hit 1-4 for Tullaroan, who kind of have started the championship well, but maybe struggled a bit since then. And maybe the form of Ballyhale Shamrocks, even since that first game, that would probably maybe be more of an insight into, it was more maybe a sense of where Ballyhale were at that point than maybe how good kind of Tullaroan were, if you know what I mean. Speaking of Ballyhale, obviously they had a comfortable win against Danesford the other day. I think Paddy Hogan was unavailable for Danesford, who's a massive blow. They just, like, along with Richie Hogan and Paul Murphy, he'd be one of their best players who they just can't afford to be missing. Obviously was in with the county for a while, and a funny kind of a one. I remember him starting midfield in a Leinster semi-final against Dublin in the rain in Portlaoise, and I think it was the last game he started for Kilkenny. Just that could be 8 or 9 years ago, I'd say, but probably, like, realistically would have been a star in any other county outside of Kilkenny. Yeah,
he would have been instrumental here, like a massive loss. And Ballyhale, they were missing, I don't think they had a full strength team. Now, I did watch this on a stream, and I probably missed the first few minutes, so I didn't see the team being fully lined out, but I know the likes of Evan Shefflin, he wasn't playing. Darren Mullen was back in, and Adrian Ronan, former Kilkenny County star, he was commentating, and he kept nearly every time Darren Mullen got the ball, there he is now with the blue boots and the no socks. So he actually had those ankle socks on. So it was a tasty enough statement to make, and Adrian Ronan certainly wasn't letting him forget it. Actually, Adrian, I used to work with Adrian in the bank many, many moons ago. Great fella. But I was really enjoying his commentary. You know, like Ballyhale had put up 1 Sheen at one stage. You know, the way we're getting an awful lot of taste of the local accents at the moment. But he was talking at one stage, and he goes, there's a big wind there now, in the way that there was previously no wind and now there's some bit of a wind. It was very enjoyable to listen to. But Colin Fennelly was back playing. Owen Reid, Rio is his nickname, as Adrian kept saying, he was stepping up with scores every time it mattered throughout. So Ballyhale, no real trouble in this game. And Brian Cody, he was under awful pressure from Paul Murphy for most of the game, but he ended up getting 1-1 in the space of a minute then later on. It was just a case of the dam bursting for Danesford, who gave a very game effort for most of the game. So Ballyhale, not unusual for them to start out slowly, but I don't think anyone necessarily would be wanting to meet them in the knockout stages, will they?
No, definitely not. No, they're as I said to you in the preview show last week, the new manager has come in, James O'Connor. He's probably finding his feet, trying to find a centre back after Mick Fennelly retiring, and things are slowly starting to bed in. So you've had the bit of hardship at the start, and maybe rejig things, refocus lads. A defeat at the start like that is probably not a bad thing for them, because it totally refocuses the mind, and they're coming into the knockout stages, and they're going to be just with the way the draw worked out, they're playing the Roar in the Stieg in the preliminary quarterfinals. Very, very hard to see them beaten there. They'll be in a quarterfinal, and that's really when they'll want to be ready. And there's still favourites for this championship in my view.
Yeah, Dixborough saw off Aaron's Own. Probably no real surprise there, is there?
Oh, jeez, I don't know. Aaron's Own were going well, even without Conor Fogarty.
But Dixborough have the scoring power, though.
Yeah, the size of the defeat, like Aaron's Own only hit 112, Dixborough put up 319. Bill Sheehan hit 4 points. As I said in previous shows, Killian Buckley is supposed to be absolutely flying it. Borough have a very strong backline, kind of with a lot of lads that have been in around Kilkenny panels in recent years. And Conor Fogarty went off injured for Aaron's Own, who haven't just coming back from a rib injury. That's a worry for them. But they're straight through to the league final where they play city rivals O'Loughlin's, and Clara actually secured second in that group on score difference ahead of Mulnavat. So they beat the Roar 323 to 216, and as I said, the Roar really struggling without Richie Lahey. Mulnavat only had 5 points to spare over Greg Ballyhale and missed out in qualification because they didn't win by enough. But the Kilkenny draw is interesting there. We just kind of touched on it briefly there. The league final, O'Loughlin's play Dixborough, and in the Shield final, James Stephens play Clara. All 4 of those are through to the quarter-finals, and they await the winners of Danesford and Mulnavat, Tullerone and Aaron's Own, Ballyhale Shamrocks and the Roar in the Stieg, and Bennett's Bridge and Greg Ballycallan. Probably the pick of the preliminary quarterfinals for me probably be Tullerone and Aaron's Own, I'd say. It's a tough, like Tullerone could have gotten an easier draw than that, and they haven't. They've probably got the toughest draw a lot of the time. They couldn't play Ballyhale, obviously. So that's going to be a tough game, but very interesting preliminary quarter final with the 4 of them going through to meet the 4 at the top.
Yeah, the 2 groups of 6 in Kilkenny I really like. There was obviously only time to play 3 group games each, and then they've worked out this knockout system thereafter. But I really like it the way there's so many games for teams to kind of find their feet, to find their form, to improve as the year goes on. And you'd imagine so many players get a chance to play games that you have those 5 group games most years, and then you've this opportunity for the knockouts, whether you're going to a league final, Shield final, relegation, try and get back into the quarterfinals. I think it's a great system. It helps when you're not in a really strong dual county. They obviously just play off the football at the start of the year and get it out of the way. But I think that's
we must find out actually whether the football was played yet this year, or what's the story, or has been played after the hurling.
It was probably played off the first week of the year.
I wouldn't imagine it was played yet. Usually played in March/April. Yeah, I wouldn't say it was played. We must find out that, because it's probably not going to be played off till after the hurling. So someone who was knocked out of hurling might be able to make a bit of a charge this year in the football.
Yeah. So just a couple of results from around the country. In Mayo, Turin beat Westport 421 to 10 points. Ballyhonest, they beat Castlebar Mitchells 21 points to 1-9. Cooler Strand Hill had a 114 to 2-8 win over Calgary St. Joseph's in Sligo. Now the Tipperary Championship, plenty of interesting games going on over the weekend. We'll kind of go through them group by group. Killadangan, they're going to go through top of their group after beating Drummond 415 to 18 points. That's a thumping enough win. Whereas JK Brackens, they drew with Rosscrea, a late Linden Fairbrother point there. That levelled it up. So that's 2 draws for JK Brackens, but Drum will go through as runners up there. So that's significant for Killadangan. I think they'd be very disappointed that they didn't beat JK Brackens the last day out. Got to a county final last year. They've been regular challengers. 2 goals for Paul Flynn, Billy Seymour with a goal, and Dan O'Mara, who actually got sent off on a second yellow late on. But that is good for Killadangan to hit the knockout stages after putting up a big score like that.
Yeah, having started the championship probably fairly slowly, that's a big kind of a statement from down now, in fairness, a 9-point win. And when you go down through, the players that they have at their disposal, Paul Flynn, Willie Connors, Billy Seymour, Dan O'Mara, Ty Gallagher, I think, is there as well. Darragh Egan's probably still on the scene.
Joe Gallagher, Alan Flynn.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like we saw Alan Flynn scored 5 points or something from wing back in an earlier game. Like, they've got serious talent, and they're probably a team that's probably similarly talented to someone like Kilrowan, but I think they're getting a lot more out of themselves maybe than Kilrowan. Obviously, we're in a county final last year as well, and they'll fancy themselves going into the knockout stages. They go in on form. They didn't start on form, but they go into the knockout stages in the sort of form that they need to be in if they're going to try and get their hands on Dan Breen at the end of the year.
Yeah, Holy Cross 120, Clonoulty Rossmore 217. Bit of a surprise one considering Clonoulty had beaten Nina fairly well the previous week.
No, it is a surprise. Yeah. Unfortunately for Holy Cross, it still means that they're out. Clonouty were obviously through going into that game, and maybe I don't know, maybe use their opportunity to use their panel a small bit, or maybe just weren't at the pitch of it. But they're still very, very capable of taking someone out. Like, you could easily see them, if Thurles don't win it, you could easily see Clonouty being there right in the mix, or taking out a really, really big team along the way. And Nina Airog bounced back then as well. They beat Airog and McCarthy Donahill 220 to 114. And then in the group that we were kind of talking about last week, where there was all sorts of different permutations, Tumivara 319, Burgess 115. Toom definitely didn't have it all their own way, but they're true, and that's the main thing. You think you caught a bit of that game yesterday evening?
I just heard updates. I was watching the stream of the Burris League against Upperchurch Drumban game, and I was hearing regular updates of the Toom game. Now, Burgess were actually 111 to 1-7 ahead at the break, but Toom pulled away late on. I think Paul Ryan might have got one of the goals there. No real surprise, but good for Burgess to put up a battling performance there, and they'll take something from that. But Tumivara and Burris Lee are the ones going through. Because Burris Lee beat Upperchurch Drumban 120 to 210. And it's funny, like, Burris Lee had a very, very slow start to this game, because Jack Butler, I think, had a goal gotten for Upperchurch after no more than 20 seconds. Someone centred the ball, he snapped it. There was no replay function, so I couldn't see who he snapped the ball over, buried it low into the corner. And I wonder, is this going to end up being one of those days for Burris Lee, because it took a fair while to get going. And I was fairly frustrated actually watching the use of the ball. Regular viewers will know that I'm from Burris Lee, so I was very frustrated to see the use of the ball. And it started off with, I think, Upperchurch kind of man-marked Brendan Maher to make sure he couldn't be spare at the back, or kind of just lurrying ball up and down the field as he normally does. Sean McCormick was initially kind of spare, seemed to be to me, and then Dan McCormick took over that role. Now, if Dan was here in front of me, I'd be saying it straight to his face, but his use of the ball at times was turning good possession, and he's fast enough to get away from people and strong enough, but so that he can work it up the field and pick out a man. But he just ballooned it to the clouds every time, so I'll be telling him that when I see him. But if Burris Lee used the ball a bit better, maybe went short to the half forward line, just, pop it in front of JD Devaney, let him turn and run, I think there'd be a bit more variety to play, and you'd probably get more scores, because looking to hit Jerry Kelly or Niall Kenny long with every single ball makes it quite predictable. And if you're the Upperchurch half back line in midfield, you just more or less know, right, Burris have the ball in the half back line, we might as well just start sprinting backwards, because that's where the ball is going to be going. It's going to be long and high. So I just feel like Burris Lee have more hurling in them than just going long ball all the time. Maybe let's evolve a small bit more. Now, I might get killed for saying that, but that's my thought.
Oh, well, they have JD Devaney and a couple of other nippy forwards as well. They have a nice variety to the forward line. If they have to go along, they can go along to Conor Kenny, Niall Kenny, or Jerry Kelly. You can also play a kind of lower, kind of quick ball through the likes of Jerry Kelly and through JD Devaney as well. And is it what's your man's name in the forward line? White helmet as well. I think he got the goal in the.
He wasn't playing. Kieran Maher. He's might be carrying an injury at the moment.
So, but they have those type of players as well. Yeah. So it's important to kind of keep variety. And as you said, if you can keep that variety, you keep teams on their toes. They don't know whether to push up or sit back, and then they're kind of caught between two stools. But it seems like towards the end of it, they were kind of maybe getting into more of a rhythm. And again, they're going into the knockout stages in a nice little place. There was kind of a precarious position there. They were obviously going into this campaign as champions, and there was a bit of pressure to come out of that group. And in fairness, they probably passed the first test with flying colours.
Yeah, and I mean, they wore down Upperchurch as the game went on. Like, Upperchurch are a good team, have some good players, good free taker and Pádraig Green, but they probably don't have enough threats over the, across the field to really be able to break down Burris Lee enough. And that's kind of the way it went as the game went on. And the long ball to Niall Kenny, which, I was a bit frustrated seeing that happen all the time, but ultimately it started to work. He caught one brilliant ball over the full back, batted it into the net, got another score or two thereafter. So you can see the threat he has. But I'd love to just see a couple more balls go short to Kevin Maher, to JD Devaney, whose pace started to kill Upperchurch late on as well. And like, you've done this, you've been on a team and you're kind of defending, and you have to chase a fast lad a couple of times, let's say 15 minutes of the game, and you have to do a 30 or 40 yard sprint after that. It kind of kills your involvement in the game for a minute or two, because you're just recuperating, aren't you?
Yeah, 100%. And it's a real control thing in hurling. The forward never seems as tired as the back. because the forward is in control of where he's moving and where he's going, where the back you're always kind of chasing. So like if you get a ball into JD Devaney, he puts the defender on the back foot, you need to keep feeding him. You know what I mean? You need to keep feeding him. They have an ace in the pack there, and he's a bit more mature than last year, probably a bit physically stronger than last year as well. So he's even more of a weapon than he was last year. So important. Like if Boris are to win it again and do probably what few people probably think they can do and win back to back, they're going to have to really utilise him. They're going to have to vary their game nicely between the Kennys and Jerry Kelly and JD Devaney and the likes of Kevin Maher.
The final group in Tipperary then over the weekend, Thurles Sarsfields, they were already through and they beat McCarthy Burris 125 to 19 points, so that was never really in doubt. It was all to play for in Loughmore against Killerwan McDonough's. Now you were down in Thurles for that, and we've kind of built up the quality that Killerwan McDonough have, and we've questioned why they haven't delivered on it in recent sort of years, and again that was the case here, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, no, listen, we played with Borough. We played Kilruan about 5 or 6 weeks ago, and I couldn't get over how well they were moving. The challenge game circuit can be, maybe it can be end up a bit blinkered from some of the teams you play and teams that are flying. But when you go down to their team, the likes of Willie Cleary, Jerome Cal, Niall O'Mara, Keane Darcy, those type of lads. Seamus Hennessy, obviously, won an All-Ireland with Tipperary in 2010. When you look at these lads, you're just thinking, why aren't they more competitive or better than they should be? And it's hard to get your head around, really. They were in a winning position against Thurles in the first game, and Lough basically went down 1-8 to 1 point in the last quarter, and they just haven't recovered at all. They looked like a side kind of crippled with nerves and fear yesterday. It was a do or die game, and Loughmore kind of took that pressure far more positively, in a far more positive way than Kilruan did. Keane Darcy just had an awful day, particularly in the first half. He had 6 wides, 4 from frees, a couple of them that were they were absolute gimmies, really. Like he's the sort of player that can shoot the lights out with score 1-12, 9 from frees like he did the week before against Mike Harkey, or he's the sort of lad that can have little influence like he did yesterday. John Ryan really tied him up yesterday, and I was chatting to Frankie McGrath after the Loughmore manager, and he was just saying they've played games before where they've put up bigger scores, but they've conceded big scores as well, and a big focus for them seems to have been the defence. They moved Brian McGrath to midfield. I thought he was brilliant yesterday. He was on the ball loads and really, really clever on the ball. But the likes of John Ryan, James Maher in defence, they were brilliant. Or John Maher, wing back. Yeah. They were outstanding. They got on a world of ball. John Maher now hits it a bit long for my liking sometimes, but he got on a world of ball, and they just had a bit more street smarts, a bit more nous, and dealt with the pressure an awful lot better than Kilruan did. And it's an awful, for the talent that Kilruan have, to be out of the championship this early. Of course, they probably could have beaten Bursley in the semi-final last year. Had probably chances to beat them, didn't take them. Now they're out of the championship at this stage of the year. Bit of a disaster for them, really. Really, really underachieving side for the talent that they have.
Yeah, because they started out this game quite well, and I think they might have been 3 or 4 points to 1 ahead at one stage, and I thought you should be much further ahead here, and then Loughmore started to pare it back a small bit. Willie Cleary and Craig Morgan in the half back line, they were getting on a world of the ball in the first half, and I was starting to think to myself, Craig Morgan's hand is going to fall off here from being on it so much. Seamus Hennessy, I think, kind of probably struggled to get into the game. Noel McGrath, actually, in the first half, Noel and John McGrath, neither of them were overly influential in the first half, and yet Loughmore were right there. So I started thinking to myself, these lads are eventually going to get into the game and go to town. And so it proved. I mean, it's not like they absolutely shot the lights out, because the team scored 2-14. 2-3 of that came from Evan Sweeney, who's of course played for Tipperary and Kerry over the years. And still, so you wonder, if Noel and John McGrath hit absolute fire in the coming games, how good can Loughmore be? And like we mentioned John Maher last week, he would have probably, I would have always fancied him to get on the Tipperary team in defence, but I think injuries probably hit him very hard. Like there was one year with the under-21s, I think I can't remember if he was centre or fullback, but really, really excellent player. I think he's he's probably got inter-county hurling in him. So
he went kicking football for a while, didn't he?
Yeah. He's been on the county football panel as well, because he's a very good athlete, and it's a dual club, so it's no surprise to see that. And we've seen this with Liam McGrath in the past, that he's been on one panel and then he goes on the other. So when you grow up in that dual in a sort of a dual club, if you've gotten called up by the hurlers and you get let go, there's a fair chance that the footballers might have a look at you. That's just something that seems to happen. So I think Loughmore, they're definitely a bit of a threat now going into the final stages. Thurles, they definitely have to be county favourites, I think, at this stage.
Yeah, just on Loughmore, it's a funny one. You mentioned about the McGraths there. Noel was influential throughout, I thought, without maybe setting the world alight in the first half. I don't know if you'll see a player use the ball better than him. His use of the ball is so good. He probably got about 20 possessions yesterday, and I don't recall him hitting the ball away. He even hit a lovely ball in for the first Loughmore goal. He had the ball about 50 yards out, and it was a simple point chance off his left-hand side. And you could just hear John shouting inside, and John was facing towards there. A ball went in, broke to John. Evan Sweeney finished it. Evan Sweeney was brilliant. He was 36 on Saturday. He was absolutely flying around the place yesterday, and was the difference between the two of them. But Loughmore didn't score from play until the 26th minute, and then they had a goal in the next minute, and then from the 26th, I think, to the 26th to the 33rd minute, it went from them being 5 points each to 2-8 to 6 points up. So they really, really turned the screw. Fortuitous enough goal for Kilruane at the end. Probably put maybe a glass on the scoreline, but I always thought Loughmore had them at arm's length. And funny if they catch fire, and the McGraths can, if they can hit a couple of points from play each, and Brian is as influential as he was from midfield again, they'll fancy their chances in the knockout stages. I don't see them winning it, but they could take out somebody fairly big.
Yeah, and like the draw hasn't been made as we're chatting here. It might be by the time some people see this, but the top seeds are Killadangan, Clonalty, Rossmore, Thurles, Sarsfields and Borrisoleigh, and the second seeds are Drummond Inch, Nina Aero, Loughmore and Toomevara. So there's going to be some very, very tasty quarterfinals there.
Yeah, without a doubt. Like you're just looking at it, and there's not going to be an easy game. Like there's not. It's just the nature of it. Like, and it's going to be a really interesting championship. Like you'd love to see. Like I don't think Loughmore could play Thurles. Like so, Thurles could get a Drum or a Toom. I still would have Thurles as relatively clear favourites at the moment. Look like a side that have really got the hunger back. Look like to be really organised and have everything the way they want it this year. Putting up savage scores, and I believe Lara's absolutely flying it again, coming off the bench. Such an important kind of role to have. Just on Kilruane as well, they were missing Ray Malachny yesterday. I think he went to Abu Dhabi during the week for work or something like that. I had to go back to school or something, so they can ill afford to be missing lads like that. And Kilruane will think like maybe that their time is running out. They're not, apart from the under 20 and under 21 winning teams of a couple of years ago, they're not blessed. I was chatting to someone yesterday, not blessed with a load of underage lads coming through and are struggling at some of the other grades. And believe they haven't won, their second team hasn't won a championship match in 4 or 5 years. So time can fairly quickly pass you by if you're not on the ball. And it kind of looks like it's passing them by at the moment.
They trucked a lot of ball aimlessly towards the end of the game. It was
five balls into the keeper's hand in the second half.
Yeah,
5 balls. Like, that's a killer.
Yeah, straight into David Kennedy's hand. Just another point actually on that Tipperary draw. Looking at the teams that have gone through as top seeds, Thurles Sarsfields are the only one of the 4 that have won every game, and 2 of those games were against Loughmore and Kilruane. So to have a 100% record in a really strong group, whereas Killadangan, Clonalty and Borrisoleigh all coming through having drawn a game apiece, I think you definitely have to give Thurles the nod at this stage. And I don't think being favourites would unduly bother them either, because they had that for years and years. So interesting to see how the draw goes in Tipperary. Just a couple of other results from across the country then. Castletown Gagan, they beat Delvin 124-14 in Westmeath. Kiltegan and Carnew, Emmetsdrew and Wicklow 14 points apiece. In Donegal, Setanta beat Sean McCool's 5-17 to 9 points. And on Friday, actually, a match between St. Eunan's and Burt that was abandoned after 6 minutes due to a serious leg injury to Paul Burns. So hopefully he's okay. I'd say we've touched on most of it, but if there's anyone out there who has any comments or feels we missed a match or a storyline or something like that, please let us know and we'll chat about it the next day.
Yeah, we promise, Shane, that we do power rankings. I can see the last 8 teams that are left in the Tipperary Championship. So I think I'll have a quick little rattle out of power rankings in Tipp while we're here. I'd have Thurles Sarsfields 1, Borrisoleigh 2, Killadangan 3, Loughmore 4, Clonalty 5, Drum 6, Nina Aero 7, and Toomevara 8. Jeez, that's my rankings at the moment.
You're going to put noses out of joint there. No doubt about that. You'll definitely put no one side, John. I'm going to go Thurles 1, Burris 2, Lockmore 3, Nina 4, Kildangan 5, Drum 6. God, who am I missing now? I'm missing 7 and 8. I can't remember who I've left out there, and I'm not going to do it again. Quickly on Waterford, actually, because there's the 4 teams left there. Ballygunner against Lismore, Mount Sion against Passage. I'll go Ballygunner, Mount Sion, Passage and Lismore. Now I think Lismore might beat Passage, but I think the semi-final for Lismore, I think they're less likely to beat Ballygunner than Passage against Mount Sion.
Yeah, Ballygunner be a clear number 1 for me. I have a funny feeling that Passage will dog it out against Mount Sion. They've been able to do that in some big games in recent years. I'd have Ballygunner 1, Passage 2, Mount Sion 3, and Lismore 4. Lismore under big pressure against Ballygunner, but the fact that they're there shouldn't be underestimated. It's a great feat to be there. They were in a Munster intermediate final only a couple of years ago. They won a Munster intermediate title only a couple of years ago, and were beaten by a Haskra in the All-Ireland semi-final. So they've progressed nicely, but I think they're probably under pressure there.
With that power rankings in Tipperary, I want to take more time on it. I want to scrap whatever I said there. Give me a bit more time, and after the draw, we'll sit down, we'll do a little power rankings, we'll put it out there. Not this old snap thing off the top of the head. Who do you think? And there's 8 names. Very hard. You need time to work this thing out.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I've been planning for the last 5 minutes of the show to do it. So
you've been letting me waffle on.
I had been ready. I had been prepared. But yeah, that's fair enough. I'll give you till after the draw. Maybe do a power rankings on the Thursday show before. It'll be Thursday week before the quarterfinals are actually played.
Yeah, we'll throw it out there and people can slate us away. Right, that's it for Club Talk Hurling, brought to you by orgaretro.com. Get these jerseys at orgaretro.com, and if you want 15% off, use the promo code OurGame. Thanks very much, Michael.
Cheers, Shane.